Hi, my name is Kirsten Bleming, and my EDP is on the observations and comparisons of the behavior of rural rodents and urban rodents. So some context, ecology is a biology study of organisms and their interactions to their physical environments. Urban ecology still studies the relationships organisms have with their surroundings, but these surroundings often have a significantly higher human population in comparison to a standard rural habitat, and are highly urbanized, often in man-made buildings rather than untouched forests. This EDP specializes on a specific field. In this lab, I sought to determine what effects both an urban and rural area can have on a species' overall behavior towards other organisms, specifically humans, and how these attitudes may differ between the two groups. In this lab, I chose squirrels as my test subjects. There were a series of observations which sought to determine the varying levels of fear a squirrel may exhibit towards humans when being offered food. I measured how long it would take in minutes for the rodents to accept the food, if they did at all. Any times under the 10 to 15 mark would be considered a level of low hesitancy, while any time above would be considered a higher display of hesitancy. Using the times recorded, I attempted to determine whether or not an urban environment can lead to low levels of fear among squirrels in relation to their human interactions and in comparison to a rural low human density where squirrels have less exposure to humans. Based on my observations, I determined that a squirrel's environment absolutely plays a role in how they may behave towards humans and possibly other organisms. The study revealed that squirrels who were located in more urbanized areas and therefore had a large human population were more receptive towards humans and the food they offered, accepting the small portions quickly with little hesitancy. This is a stark contrast to the rural squirrels who may have little experience with human interactions. I was able to determine that an environment can have an effect on the way an organism behaves in regards to other organisms they interact with, and that starkly different environments can create divergence among species behavior. For my EDP, I chose the eastern gray squirrels as my organism, and it's an organism that is relatively small in physical size, but more than makes up for their small stature and population density. Rodents in general are a unique species in that they can make a dwelling in essentially any and all environments, which is why the presence of squirrels is such a common occurrence in both urban and rural areas. Squirrels in particular are natural gatherers, and the collection of various forms of food, whether it be part of their natural diet or not, is a trait that the squirrels owe their entire urban existence to. According to Dr. Etienne Benson, author of the scientific article, The Urbanization of the Eastern Gray Squirrel in the United States, his research into the patterns of the squirrel migration into urban areas throughout the past 5 decades has revealed that squirrels view humans as neither a predator, prey, or even a competitor, but rather as a source of food, much in the same way they view trees as being a source of shelter. To an urban squirrel that sees humans every day, we are simply another extension of the environment to them. Benson is also quick to note how this relatively mundane view of squirrels' harbor for humans may not be universal. In rural areas like Tennessee or Texas, squirrel hunting is not only common but encouraged. Large skyscrapers, highways, and outdoor outlets are also not as common of an occurrence in these rural areas, which mainly consist of farmland and homes that can be miles apart from each other. In short, the human presence is relatively minimal in comparison to a big city area. Therefore, not only do squirrels rarely see humans, but when they do, the likelihood they witness one of their own kind being killed or being overly frightened by the appearance of a larger organism is incredibly high. It's with this historical and scientific research that I began to ask myself this question: can an environment and its human features alter the way an organism behaves towards other organisms? More specifically, can a constant human presence within an environment and lack thereof reveal a notable difference in behavior within these two distinct squirrel populations? My aim was to see if a constant human presence may make a squirrel more receptive towards humans, and in contrast, if not being exposed to humans on a daily basis could make a squirrel more wary of them. By observing and creating graphs, I was able to conclude whether or not a squirrel's environment and its features has a direct effect on a squirrel's overall behavior towards other organisms. When observing the various squirrels found in the rural and urban locations, it is believed that if a squirrel is located in an area that has a large human population and a high rate of daily squirrel to human interactions, then the squirrels in this area will be more receptive and less wary of me offering them food, and are therefore more receptive to other organisms. This is in stark contrast to squirrels found in rural areas with a low human population and less daily squirrel to human interaction. Given that my project is covering the interactions between two very different organisms, it will be interesting to see if this behavior extends to other organisms. Could organisms physically larger than squirrels, such as deer or raccoons, also demonstrate fear awareness to humans in a rural setting? And will their urban counterparts react the same way, or will they be more receptive to humans? In fact, and this is a question that we will look at later on, is it possible that humans are not an exception and that any organism that is considered an outsider is automatically viewed as either predator or competitor by the other native organisms to that area? So for my methods portion, I chose two locations in Raleigh, North Carolina, the urbanized North Carolina State Campus and the rural Lake Johnson. I attended each location once a week at around noon for about 2 to 3 hours. For each session, 15 squirrels were individually selected to be tested, and the experiment took place over the course of 5 weeks. Each squirrel appeared to be the same age, meaning no infant squirrels were tested on, and all squirrels were the same species. A small handful of trail mix was placed on the ground, and I was exactly 6 yards or 18 feet away from the trail mix pile. For the urbanized areas, my presence was known due to me not trying to conceal myself. However, I made no further attempts at actually interacting with the squirrels. For rural squirrels, I followed a similar procedure, but I tried to make my presence more known by making small noises as I placed down the food. This method was done in hopes of alerting the squirrels to the food and showing them that it was me who placed the food down rather than just being some random occurrence. Human and squirrel interaction was measured based on time. More specifically, it was measured based on how long it took the squirrels to accept the food. Based on the evidence presented during the observations, it is clear that rural squirrels demonstrate a much more cautious attitude around humans in comparison to the urbanized squirrels. This can be shown in figures 1 and 2. Figures 1 show the number of squirrels in urban areas that interact with the trail mix. As seen below, the majority of squirrels interacted with the food within the 5 to 10 minute mark, showing that they exhibited low levels of hesitancy, and only a few of them did not approach the food at all. This is a stark contrast to figure 2 with the number of squirrels in a rural area that interacted with the trail mix, where the majority of them experienced high levels of hesitancy as shown by being above the 10 to 15 mark, and many more didn't approach compared to the urban area that interacted with the trail mix, and only a few, about 5, demonstrated areas of low hesitancy. As previously stated, my findings reveal that squirrels who dwell in an urbanized area consist of a large human population and many features specific to humans, and are much more receptive towards humans and potential treats they offer, in comparison to rural squirrels who dwell in environments that do not have high human and squirrel interactions. Therefore, the experiment supported my original hypothesis. When comparing the two graphs, it is obvious that the urban squirrels accepted the food at a much quicker rate than the rural squirrels, with the majority of rodents accepting the food after about 10 minutes. In comparison, the majority of rural squirrels did not accept the food until anywhere from 20 to 25 minutes, but a large portion of the group also refused the food outright. Based on my prior knowledge of the way urban and rural squirrels typically view humans, according to Dr. Benson's research, my findings seem to indicate that this research can go past our squirrel subjects. In a study done by Dr. Justin Sukrashi and his team, it was found that feeding receptiveness as humans was not something that is limited to organisms smaller than the average human. Organisms ranging from mice to 300-pound mountain lions displayed behaviors of fear and hesitancy around humans, organisms that they had never previously seen prior to the experiment. The behaviors of these raw, or more like wild animals, were then later compared to the behaviors of the same animals in captivity, and the behaviors were predictably very different. Mountain lion experiment is useful in that it opens up a new discussion topics in relation to the findings found in mine in the mountain lion experiment. We can assume that yes, the presence and lack thereof of humans in an environment can have an effect on the behavior of the organisms dwelling there, and this behavior is likely different from the group within the opposite presence. Humans are considered by many to be at the top of the biological food chain. but it appears as though humans are not the only organism that can have this behavioral effect. My findings give absolutely no indication that the squirrels in rural areas were afraid of humans by themselves, but were rather more afraid of an organism that they had never seen before or could likely be a potential predator. It can be assumed that if a mountain lion was released into the Lake Johnson area and even on the NC State campus, then the squirrels would most likely exhibit similar behaviors and hide in their nests. But if a deer were to be released at Lake Johnson, the squirrels would hardly show any indication of being aware of the deer's presence due to deer being a natural organism to Lake Johnson. Admittedly, it is always important to include some sources of uncertainty in a lab or field research. In this case, it's no exception. For one, while squirrels do hibernate in the fall and winter months, they do engage in a gathering period where they collect as much food as possible. Therefore, I cannot say for certain that the squirrels in either areas were more compelled to receive food for survival than they were frightened and or unbothered by the sight of a human. In other words, the desperation may have been so great that my presence hardly mattered. My other limitation was my inability to track the squirrels. While I tried to the best of my ability to experiment on different squirrels and never observed the same one more than once, there was no way I could necessarily prevent myself from accidentally observing a squirrel multiple times. Fortunately, there are steps I can take to improve upon this experiment. I can conduct this experiment early on in the year, possibly in late September rather than October. That way I can ensure that squirrels are not yet preparing for their gathering season and are, in a sense, choosing to approach the food from a place of want, not need. I could also take better steps at attempting to track the squirrels and make sure I do not observe the same one twice by choosing a larger area and traveling to various individual spots within that area that are relatively far from each other, ensuring that I do not repeat the observation process multiple times. To conclude, this lab was incredibly insightful in teaching me how to apply my observational skills and knowledge that I learned from my time at NC State to make accurate conclusions. Through my time as a student in Biology 181, my research as to how an environment can have both physical and mental effects on organisms within the domain, and my first-hand observations of the squirrels' behavior towards me and the approaches they took whilst interacting with me and the food being offered, I was able to accurately determine that urban and rural squirrels do, in fact, exhibit different behaviors from the counterparts in regards to interaction with humans. While limitations were present, I overcame these challenges by comparing my work with other scientists. All in all, my observations on the interactions between urban and rural squirrels and humans provided me with further insight as to how to accurately apply my observations, findings, and later formed conclusions to form a hypothesis that was both insightful and later proved to be relatively accurate. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed.